Good morning, everybody. Bonjour. I'll just introduce myself as well quickly, very briefly. I'm Maurits van Beverdonke. I am based at the University of the Western Cape in Cape Town, South Africa. And I co-chair the Critical Humanities Spaces Network with Kathy Wallerstein, who's based in Paris. Unfortunately, I am linguistically challenged, and so I speak 3 languages, but none of them are French. So I will run this in English. 2 of our presenters will present in French, and we will lean on panelists and people in the audience to translate as necessary if it's needed. So our first, I can't read this. Sorry. Age catches up with you, and then reading from a page becomes more and more of a challenge. So our first speaker, we're going to go in the order as it is on the program. So it'll be Özge Derman, who holds a PhD in sociology from the EHESS Paris, where she was a member of CRAL. Her dissertation focuses on creative performativity in post-2010 social movements. She earned BA degrees in design and in dance. That's from Milan and Istanbul, along with MA degrees in sociology at Galatasaray University in social science and humanities. She currently teaches sociology at the Sciences Po in Sorbonne in Paris. The title of her talk will be Performative Transitions in Time and Space, Activism Through Art in Social Movements. At least that was the title on the website. It might have changed. I am not responsible for people's independent agency. Our second speaker will be Madeleine Planix-Crocker. Okay, I Americanize. Okay. Madeleine Planix-Crocker pursued a Bachelor of Arts at Princeton University. Sorry, and a Master 2 in Performance and Gender Studies at the EHESS, where she is currently completing her PhD. Her dissertation research examines methods for devising performance in contemporary French artistic practices, ranging from dance to theater, as well as the visual arts. Madeleine is Associate Curator at Lafayette Anticipation, in charge of performance programming. Since 2021, she has been teaching art theory at the Beaux-Arts de Paris as co-director of the chair Troubles, Alliances and Aesthetics. And then our third, the title will be Le Plateau, a Conversation Piece. The Plateau. Yeah. Oh, you see. And then our third speaker will be Philippe Roussin. Is that right? He is Director of Research Emeritus at the CNRS, member of the Center for Research on Arts and Language. The latest edited works of Freedom for the Social Sciences with Nicole Lapierre and Evelyn Ribet, which is published through Communications.
Yeah, that's the title.
And then there is Literature, Democracy and Transitional Justice, published with Mohammed Salah Omri through Oxford, and then Post-Censorship with Catherine Brun, which is also through Communications. So his title will be Ecotopia, Utopia and Responsibility. So I'm going to hand it over to them. They each get about 30 minutes or so to do their presentation, and then we'll open for conversation.
Cool.
So you,
I will. The timer. Oh, it's okay.
do you want me to tell you when you have 5 minutes left?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Share screen if you want to.
Yeah, I tried.
Oh, is that what you're trying to do? So you have
Yeah,
to, yeah?
it's here.
So then
Zoom
partage.
share screen.
I know, it
And
should
this
be.
one.
And then just,
Yeah.
I made it.
like so.
Okay.
Yeah, and then if you want to just minimize.
Yeah, I will try. I'll do it here. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, can you hear me? Yes.
What's on the, oh, but that's not
Oh,
what's
no.
on the screen.
No, click on that. The screen seems. Okay,
There you
great.
go.
Okay. Okay. So, this presentation, in this presentation, I focus on creative actions in social and political restless situations where people took the streets against economic, social, political inequalities or against governments. I will argue thus the ways in which people and their actions compose utopic performances, collectivities. This involves art and creativity enacting new forms of resistance that transcended the physical space-time of the protest events of social movements, specifically concentrating on two movements of occupation, Occupy Wall Street and Gezi movement, which my doctoral research was based on as well. I believe you know enough about Occupy Wall Street, but I will briefly talk about the movement. Occupy Wall Street was inspired by the Arab Spring and the Spain's 15M movement and the other occupation movements. It started with the occupation of Zuccotti Park in New York, Manhattan Zuccotti Park, in September 2011. And the occupation lasted 2 months. We are the 99% was the main slogan against the 1% who owned the 40% of the wealth in the world. And Gezi movement was happened in Istanbul, Turkey, occurred in May, June 2013, in reaction to the city's decision to demolish Gezi Park in Taksim neighborhood as a part of urban transformation project. And the park was occupied for 3 weeks. The movement expanded all over the country. I employ the notion of creative performativity, embracing multiple actions, creative actions, artistic actions. So first is art created by artists for the sake of political activism. Second, art created by artists as art within the bounds of a social movement. And third, creative and performative actions by all activists, whether they are artists or not. Okay. So I drew on the idea of plural performativity of Judith Butler, articulating a voice that is both individual, singular, and corporeal reality, and social, where bodies come together in the street. The first question is, in what creative ways does plural performativity appear in public space? And in Occupy Wall Street and Gezi movement, we talk about the bodies appearing and acting creatively together to generate what Hannah Arendt calls the space of appearance. It occurs when people come together in the manner of speech and action, and dissolves not only by their disappearance, but also with the interruption of their activities. I quote from Arendt, "Wherever people gather together, it is potentially there, but only potentially, not necessarily, and not forever." End of quote. A second question would be how this potential togetherness appears and how it comes to an end, how it disappears. So these questions bring to mind what Kathy was talking about yesterday, about emergence, re-emergence, interruptions, ephemerality, and disappearance. So I examined the creative performativity in 3 dimensions: corporal, spatial, and temporal. These are some images from Gezi and Occupy Wall Street. On the left, you can see a drawing for Gezi because it was to defend for the trees. And it's written, "Don't touch my tree." The second is from the General Assembly in Zuccotti Park. And the third is the poster published by Adbusters, the journal that the journal Adbusters, anti-capitalist journal Adbusters, Canadian, to call people to occupy Wall Street already before the occupation. Acting bodies, both individually and collectively, appeared as mediums of resistance and of acting together, and also staged gestural repertoire of actions. These were the bodies in action, performatively exercising their right together and claimed to be recognized. They took the streets and took the stage, in a sense, in various forms of creativity, performativity, and civil disobedience, and through both individual and collective acts. The spatial dimension is crucial to analyze the occupation of public space, the street, the park, as well as the enactment of sensible, imaginative, and liminal spaces. The parks were the main occupied area and the desired living space, but the movements transcended that area of encampment. The spirit of the occupation expanded throughout the streets and the neighborhoods by means of graffiti, songs, gatherings, handmade signs, barricades, and particularly through marching. The urban space was transformed through creative spatial arrangements, both still and mobile, both permanent and temporary. So the stability and the temporariness of the actions. For example, encampment in a way was pretty stable until it wasn't. Barricades and graffiti in Istanbul and performances in both movements we can call as stable and temporary as well. The liminal state between stability and temporariness was one of the temporal contradictions that drove me to examine the temporal dimension of creative performativity. The other contradictory element was the rhythms that coexisted within the movements. The slow-paced community feeling and peace within the parks. Once you get in the parks, it's another world. And hyperspeed movement and sense of uneasiness out of the park and within, sometimes, especially in both movements, but especially in Gezi movement because there was too much violence by the police. But also in Occupy Wall Street. I had some interviews talking about like receiving messages in the middle of night, in the middle of the night, and people calling them to the park to protect the park, to clean the park. Otherwise, the city would destroy everything for reasons of hygiene. And also the polyrhythms of the urban space and the bodies. So the urban space was still there, and the bodies were moving in the cities. Furthermore, the past, present, and future coexisted through the use of slogans, discourses, symbols, generations, as well as individual and collective memories. For example, in Gezi movement in Taksim Square, there is the Opera House, and it was closed at that moment for some reason to rebuild it, reconstruct, or to change something. But it was closed for 4 or 5 years already. And people occupied the Opera House as well. And they put banners. It's a big building. And they put banners on the building. And the first image that I shared here, for example, is from this opera house. And this is one of the dancers' performance, Whirling Dervish of Gezi. Like, of course, he's posing for a photograph, you can see, but it's the Taksim squares in front of him. So not only slogans representing old past times, past experiences, ideas, but also new performances. Okay, getting back to the occupation of spaces and the creative practices that came along with the lived space of experiences, I'd like to start with the mapping practices. They appeared mostly as the visual imagination of experienced and lived space and as a tool for description. They did not represent the calculated governable space of urban planners or architects. They rather operated as a notation to register and decipher multiple dimensions of spatiality. You can see on the left the map that I found online, actually, explaining how Gezi Park was organized in it. There were separations, like we always say that there was solidarity and peaceful environment, but not every time. And interestingly, all the social conflicts that exist in our community existed in a way in the park as well. But of course differently, because there were points of discussion and it was easier to find solutions. But you can see here, for example, the Kurdish, there were anti-capitalist Muslims, LGBT community, nationalists, socialists, communists, anarchists. They were all separated. Mapping served us to discover new patterns of tracing the constant movement, the stillness, the rhythm, the flow, the transformation, the imprints that people leave through their moving in and around the places, spaces, through both traditional and innovative forms of inscription. So we can talk for Gezi, for example, through the graffitis. People moving within the city, leaving traces, anonymous traces, also through the graffitis and inscriptions on the ground or on the walls. Handmade signs would be more for Occupy Wall Street, because the main thing in Occupy Wall Street in Zuccotti Park was handmade signs. Barricades that existed in Gezi to protect the neighborhood from the police. Marches, in both cases, assemblages of people and objects that temporarily occupied the spaces. In the middle, you can find the Occupy Wall Street journal that was created during the Zuccotti occupation. There were so many journals, but this is one of them that I found in archives in New York. And here you can see the similar description to explain how the park was organized. And also during the interviews with the artists and the activists, some of them, they always explain me how the park was organized through drawings. Like, they did not only use the discourse, but also the drawings to explain me how it was, how it occurred in the park. And in some cases, they performed a transition from flat surface to three-dimensional understanding of ideas. And in other cases, they configured the lived space into cartographical flat surface. So a great example would be Rachel's map. On the right side, you can see Declaration of the Occupation of New York City General Assembly. It's a document that was created during the General Assembly, and she was there, and she took this document and created this visual map, mind map, representing the transformation of ideas and discourses to a flat surface graphical map. She did not do it by herself. She did it in the park, on the floor, on the ground, and she used the other activists as participants. They participated in this description. It's not so they're full of ideas by the participants, activists in the park in that map, not only the written text by the New York City General Assembly. So the maps demonstrated and indicated the happenings, such as marches and general assemblies, the latter as the embodiment of the direct democracy and the practice of a consensus method for collective decision-making in Zuccotti Park. as I told you before, mapping occurred at times through critical, humorous, joyful, and temporary graffiti and wordplay that reclaimed the streets in and around Gezi Park. Likewise, barricades appeared as temporary monuments of resistance. Architectures, it's architectures by Henri Lefebvre, that transformed the administered space of the city. The occupied Zuccotti Park as a counter-monument itself in the midst of the phallic realm of Wall Street skyscrapers. On the left, you can see one of the first representations, like icons, of Gezi Park is the women in red, as she was described on Twitter and Facebook, hashtag women in red. And she has become a symbol of resistance, but especially women's resistance against the police, because it was the first day of the movement, actually, when 20 to 50 people occupied the Gezi Park to protect its destruction, and the police reacted really violently, and that woman in red, who is also a scholar and a dancer at the same time, she just turned her head without moving. And she became important. As you can see, one of the stencils or graffitis or inscriptions on the floor to explain how she was described in the movement. You can see from their dimensions, the police and the women. And on the right, you can see Zuccotti Park. One example of high handmade signs corporations are boring. And there were so many handmade signs, drawings as well on the floor. And they created kind of, I quote from an interviewee, tapestry of signs where people could curate, like the participants, activists could curate the space of action. And the occupations expanded into new areas through marches and walking in the streets as multiple trajectories of insurgency were shaped. A performative articulation between spaces and times occurred, for example, through an artistic performance by Fulya Peker, performer, dancer, performer and theater artist in New York City. She walked across Manhattan holding a 12-year-old tree in her arms, passing through different neighborhoods from 114th Street Columbia University to the 14th Street Union Square in September 2013. Her walking performance, she called A Tree Indeed, lasted through 8.5, 9 hours as she walked 100 blocks in New York City every day. So it was during, just after the Gezi movement, actually. She walked from Columbia Street until Union Square, and she left the tree somewhere in the garden in Union Square as a resistance for Gezi in New York. The ephemeral compositions of objects and living beings appeared in the form of installation and performance. As an example would be the puppets accompanying the marches of Occupy Wall Street and New York. Puppets as human, non-human artifacts played a part in the creative performativity. There was a puppets guild producing puppets for the movement. Likewise, the oral occupation of space and time occurred in multiple ways, from drumming to music making. Drumming was one of the things in Zuccotti Park that existed all the time. Music making in both streets. Silence and singing at the same time, as well as ephemeral moments in between anxiety and peacefulness, obscurity and hope. The active solidarity and togetherness appeared in the form of we, as in the We Are the 99% slogan of Occupy Wall Street, and was incorporated under the name of Çapulcu, which is looter, reappropriated by the protesters of Gezi as a badge of honor. It was a word used by the Prime Minister, now President, for the activists, and it was used as a badge of honor by the activists. And even Noam Chomsky, he shared a YouTube video supporting Gezi movement, and on the side it was written, "I am also a Çapulcu. I'm also Luther." From the gathering of bodies to the speech, silence, graffiti, and gestures, togetherness represented the collective subjectivity rather than homogeneous entity. It was a potential and temporary but not everlasting togetherness, as Arendt would argue. The short-lived but repeated conflicts, as I told you, between the nationalists in Gezi Park and the Kurdish protesters demonstrated potential disagreements and togetherness at the same time. The continuous drumming in Zuccotti Park, for instance, created a conflict with the general assemblies that were held in the park, a space for assembled bodies to debate. The general assemblies, just like Gezi's forums, occurred through the use of hand signals as bodily codified systems registering the consensus and dissensus, and the experience of human microphone. The practice of human microphone required interruptions to allow the audience to repeat the speaker's word, short sentences to which responses came with hand gestures. A direct participatory experience, experimental and embodied choreographies of resistance that occurred simply as collective improvisation. The collective improvisation incorporated the articulation between the individual and collective. It is a term used by Yves Citon. It is about the articulation between the individual and collective within the movements, where the solidarity between the singularities enabled the potential human togetherness. To Yves Citon, he talks about the jazz musicians, about collective improvisation, individual rhythms, and flow within the group. The body of jazz drummer stands both independently and coordinated to the other members of the group, who are also independent. Altogether, they constitute an ensemble. As mentioned, we may discuss the question of rhythm in terms of coexistence of multiple rhythms at the same time. Thinking about the polyrhythms within the parks and within the New York City and Istanbul, the movements, I would like to look at this performance, an unexpected performance, protest, performed in Gezi, the Standing Man, which I consider a micro-event within the event. He is a young dancer, performer, and my friend also, we danced together, that silently stood still in the middle of Taksim Square for 8 hours. A protest to the violent conduct of the government during the Gezi movement occurred, and it occurred one day after the evacuation of the Gezi Park. The stand-in by the artist represented both a form of active citizenship and a non-violent intervention through a small gesture to create counter-public space. And the duration of the act, of course, determined the influential voice raised by the Standing Man, while the rhythm of the event metamorphosed through the 8 hours he stood in. So we could observe 3 episodes in regards to temporal rhythms within this event, micro-event. The first 5 hours, he stood still. When he stood still, occurred as the episode of perception and comprehension of the act among the audience, because it was not a planned event. It was unexpected, and he decided when he was walking to stop and just stay here. And this was also the phase of the propagation on social media. The rhythm of the act itself contrasted the public rhythm of everydayness, because the Taksim Square is a very central moving space, and him standing alone, coming together, doing something was very forbidden at that moment. So nobody really at the beginning could notice someone standing alone would do any protest. The second episode had to do with the reproduction of the act during the last 3 hours. The collectivization in Taksim. Behind him, you can see the phase of collectivization at the beginning. This collectivization in Taksim appeared to disrupt the social rhythm both in public and digital spaces, as it became a top tweet on Twitter. The peak of its performativity introduced consequently an arrhythmia in the social rhythm, when the flow of events led to the increased police harassment and violence. So he stopped his action when the police started to harass not him, but the other people behind him. The third episode, which could be tagged as the post-event, marked the beginning of the real arrhythmia in public space through the unprecedented propagation of the act in other neighborhoods. Everyone, all of a sudden, would stop in the street and stay silent without moving, like in the normal everyday life, I mean, here. And not maybe for 8 hours, but 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And it was, if I stay, I did also, of course, in my neighborhood. I stayed for 15 minutes, and I could see other people doing it at the same time around me. So, of course, we shouldn't consider these episodes separate. It was a fluid alteration of polyrhythmic movements. Unpredictable, spontaneous, and simple, with the element of surprise. This gesture of standing silently had a transformative and influential impact. It was radically contingent. Sewell says, I quote, contingent, unexpected, and inherently unpredictable events can undo and alter the most apparently durable strands of history. As the major events, Occupy Wall Street and Gezi demonstrated to be shapelifters without necessarily instigating sharp revolutionary changes. The utopic performance lies in the duality of structure and change, the dynamic of form and flow, in and of time, in and of space, as Robin Wagner-Pacevici identifies as fundamental for eventful transitions. In short, the embodiment of the imagination across time and space has the potential for transformation, a multiplicity of actions from graffiti to barricades, from hand signals to assemblies, from parody music to projections on buildings, from filmmaking to standing still, and many performative actions, whether spontaneous or organized, were constituted parts of the creative performativity that generated transformation. Performative transitions between human and non-human people and objects, individual subject and collective subjectivity, as well as between spontaneity and organization, stability and temporariness, form and flow, emerged through art and imagination in social movements as in everyday life. And I would like to conclude with this image with Turkish Airlines flight attendants performing a performance, a choreographed act in Gezi movement, in the main scene of Gezi movement. They were in strike at that moment, since 2 years at that moment, I think. And Gezi happened. They joined to the Gezi movement, and they were doing strike. They had the space where they did the conventional strike in the Turkish Airlines headquarters, but they also joined to the movement, and they realized many actions. And it's like very fresh from the oven. I wrote an article about this act. You can see in Communication. It came out basically 2 days ago. In French, yes. If you would like to see, it's an issue on danser en lutte in communications. Okay, Thank you for listening.
Je suis pas très à l'aise avec le microphone. Merci.
Juste que si vous vous retournez
Ah oui.
à ce moment-là, si vous voyez que vous vous retournez souvent,
Ok.
il vaut mieux prendre l'autre.
Entendu.
Voilà.
Merci.
Sinon, je serais vraiment plus en face.
Pas de souci. Merci.
Sinon, vous pouvez le mettre comme vous voulez.
Ok. Ouais. Pas de souci. De toute façon, hello. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to switch to French, but actually my paper will be an exercise in code switching between French and English, my two native tongues. So maybe I'll be able to pick up those who don't follow French with my citations in English. So I hope I don't leave you stranded too long. Tout d'abord, je souhaiterais remercier Catherine Wallerstein, ainsi que Tiffaine Samoyo et Marion Dupuis du CRAL, mon laboratoire de rattachement, de m'avoir encouragée à participer à ce colloque passionnant. Et merci à toutes les personnes qui ont collaboré à sa mise en œuvre, et merci à vous pour votre écoute. Alors, la communication suivante est issue d'une recherche menée autour du plateau, œuvre produite par l'artiste Ève-Gabrielle Chabanon et Abou Dubaev. Et je peux vous en donner un aperçu. Donc, Abou Dubaev, un artisan stuccateur, au sein de Lafayette Anticipation, la fondation d'entreprise des Galeries Lafayette, un espace d'art contemporain situé dans le Marais parisien et accessible gratuitement. Cette recherche figure notamment dans le dernier chapitre de ma thèse, que je suis en train de compléter, co-dirigée par Esteban Bourg et Elisabeth Claire, et qui propose d'évaluer les modalités et méthodes du faire ensemble dans les champs élargis de la performance contemporaine en France, de la danse et du théâtre jusqu'aux arts visuels et plastiques. Clore la thèse, qui prend racine dans les études de performance ou performance studies, par un exemple issu des arts visuels, peut paraître ou peut questionner en tout cas. Or, dans le cadre de mon projet doctoral consacré à des processus artistiques partagés entre différentes personnes, artistes, participants et participantes, j'y trouve un grand intérêt. En effet, je défends qu'aborder une œuvre d'art plastique telle que le plateau, par le prisme des études de performance, c'est une manière d'évaluer les mouvements d'une pratique artistique collective, ce que l'historienne de l'art Mi-Wan Kwon nomme « collective artistic practice » dans le champ des arts visuels. Je m'inscris d'ailleurs dans la continuité de la démarche de Kwon qui consiste à prendre le champ de la performance comme framework ou cadre par lequel aborder l'objet d'art présenté en contexte institutionnel, un musée ou une galerie, comme cela est le cas du plateau. Cette approche importe car elle agit en tentative d'ouverture, c'est-à-dire de rendre les disciplines disponibles, utiles les unes aux autres, se faisant le reflet du croisement historique des pratiques artistiques. Afin de lancer cette étude, je propose de concentrer notre regard sur un mouvement précis du plateau, à savoir son apparition en espace public à l'occasion de l'installation de l'œuvre. Rester sur ce qui apparaît, what appears, est une manière de souligner ce que ma recherche doit à la pensée de la théoricienne Sarah Ahmed. En effet, l'apparition d'objets est une préoccupation phénoménologique à laquelle s'attarde Ahmed au regard d'une approche matérialiste. Dans l'ouvrage Queer Phenomenology, Ahmed revient au Capital de Marx, qui prend l'objet de la table en exemple pour introduire le concept de fétichisme de la marchandise. Je propose de revenir brièvement sur ce concept revisité par Ahmed afin d'en étudier le lien pertinent avec l'étude du plateau, qui possède l'apparence d'une table oblique pour cause de sa surface plane et inclinée, comme vous avez pu le voir précédemment. Marx emprunte le concept de fétichisme à l'anthropologie afin de donner sens à la qualité apparemment mystique d'objets circulant dans le marché capitaliste. Le philosophe compare cette croyance à celle qui anime les séances de spiritisme en vogue en Europe à la deuxième moitié du XIXe siècle, et pendant lesquelles les tables se mettraient à danser, habitées par des esprits. Les séances sont ainsi connues sous le nom de tables tournantes. Selon Marx, de telles croyances du fétichisme au spiritisme réappropriées par le capitalisme mènent à penser que les objets, dont les tables en l'occurrence, sont dotés de caractéristiques intrinsèques d'une vie propre. Or, Marx estime que cette vie est volée et il explique cela ou ce processus en termes économiques. Une fois la table introduite au sein du marché, donc en tant que marchandise, elle est sevrée du contact sensuel avec les mains des productrices l'ayant fabriquée à partir d'une matière, donc le bois, aux propriétés physiques spécifiques qui en déterminaient la valeur d'usage. Sur le marché, la valeur d'échange de la table est déterminée indépendamment de celle des travailleuses qui l'ont produite. La vie de l'objet leur serait ainsi usurpée. Le fétichisme de la marchandise décrit un processus de réification réduisant les rapports sociaux à des relations d'échange autour de marchandises et non pas entre personnes. Donc ainsi, selon Ahmed, l'approche matérialiste propose d'établir ou de rétablir l'histoire d'arrivée d'objets qui récuse l'entrée sur le marché comme un début de vie. Or, ce qui intéresse la théoricienne tout particulièrement, c'est qu'une telle approche puisse s'appliquer à l'étude d'un ensemble d'objets dans lequel on pourrait inclure des objets d'art, comme le plateau, et non pas uniquement à la marchandise. Et je cite ici Ahmed. What a Marxist approach would allow us to do if we extend Marx's critique of the commodity to the very matter of the wood, as well as the form of the table, is to consider the history of what appears and how it is shaped by histories of work. The commodity might be one moment in the life history or career of an object. C'est alors qu'Ahmed articule l'histoire d'arrivée d'objets en tant que dynamique, composée d'histoires de travail, mais également d'histoires de transport, que Ahmed décrit as a history of changing hands, d'échange de main en main. En revenant au moment d'apparition du plateau, à l'occasion de son installation publique à la Fayette Anticipation, donc une installation qui mobilise la force coordonnée de 9 personnes, comme vous pouvez voir à l'écran, pour cause des dimensions imposantes de l'œuvre, pesant près de 400 kilos, nous pouvons nous demander quelle est l'histoire d'arrivée de l'œuvre, dont l'occasion du heavy lifting, étape de manutention et d'installation de cette charge lourde, nous donne à voir une partie des mouvements. Et pourquoi, dans le cas précis du plateau, urge-t-il de raconter cette histoire ? Nous montrerons dès lors que les mouvements des pratiques artistiques collectives auxquelles je m'intéresse correspondent à la fois, 1, au mouvement du travail, qui, dans le cas du plateau, sont partagés. J'évoque ici les gestes et circulations des collaboratrices qui constituent l'œuvre et qui la déplacent, comme nous le voyons ici, ainsi que 2, le travail des mouvements. Soit ce que l'ensemble de ces gestes partagés autour de la production et de l'exposition de l'œuvre opère ou performe, d'une part sur les pratiques individuelles des productrices et d'autre part sur les structures qui accueillent l'œuvre. En effet, si Ahmed s'intéresse à ce qui se performe sur et avec la table pour lui donner une forme, c'est qu'elle se tourne également à ce que la table performe, ce qu'elle soutient or supports. The actions performed on the object as well as with the object shape the object. The object in turn affects what we do, dit Ahmed. Afin de poursuivre l'étude des mouvements des pratiques artistiques collectives propres au plateau, je vous propose d'effectuer le chemin inverse de celui du plateau au moment de son apparition, c'est-à-dire de retrouver l'endroit d'où il vient et celles qui l'ont fabriqué. Je vous amène donc au sous-sol de la Fayette Anticipation, où se situent des ateliers de production in situ. Et des ateliers de production. La présence in situ d'ateliers de production est une singularité de la Fondation qui ouvre ses portes en 2018. Afin d'accentuer la mission motrice du lieu, François Quintin, ancien directeur artistique de la Fondation, accompagné des curatrices Hicham Khalidi, Charles Aubin et Anna Collin, propose de concevoir une exposition collective à partir d'11 œuvres produites au sein même des ateliers de la Fayette. C'est dans ce cadre que la curatrice Anna Collin présente François Quintin à l'artiste F. Gabriel Chabanon, ancien enseigne étudiante de la Open School East, une école d'art aux pédagogies alternatives confondée par Anna Collin à Londres. À partir de cette rencontre, datée de 2016, se formule l'invitation à participer à l'exposition collective de Lafayette Anticipation, nommée « Le Centre ne peut tenir ». En guise d'introduction à l'exposition, ouverte de juin à septembre 2018, je cite des propos de François Quintin recueillis du catalogue. Donc, le Centre ne peut tenir questionne avant tout les enjeux de sa propre mise en œuvre et pose 11 fois la question suivante. Qu'est-ce que peut produire une œuvre d'art ? L'appréciation d'une exposition d'art contemporain est aujourd'hui conditionnée par des habitudes discursives pour lesquelles les œuvres deviennent des éléments d'un propos identifiable. Le Centre ne peut tenir n'est donc pas une exposition thématique, au sens où l'entendent la plupart des institutions, mais en l'occurrence, il convient de revenir sur la jeunesse du projet pour percevoir les enjeux qui résident dans l'acte de produire. Faire émerger un propos, une situation, une rencontre, laisser de la place à l'incertitude. De ces propos recueillis de François Quintin, tournons-nous désormais à la pratique de l'artiste F. Gabriel Chabanon, que vous voyez ici avec le t-shirt noir, afin de comprendre la pertinence de l'invitation dans le cadre de cette exposition en particulier. Afin de guider la présentation des enjeux clés du travail de l'artiste, qui mériterait une communication à part entière, je propose de tirer un fil introduit au début de mon papier, à savoir celui de la pensée de Sarah Ahmed. Chabanon lit Ahmed et se réfère notamment à son essai « The Non-Performativity of Anti-Racism ». Si Ahmed se concentre sur la non-performativité des institutions universitaires, dont on a pu parler hier également avec Catherine, et par non-performativité, Ahmed veut dire « When speech acts do not do what they say, they do not, as it were, commit a person, organization, or state to an action », Chabanon y trouve des résonances avec les mondes de l'art, qui elle aborde par le biais de l'écriture, de la vidéo, de la sculpture et de la performance. Dès lors, la pratique de Chabanon se construit avec le souci de soulever ces irrégularités institutionnelles, un travail qui ne peut se faire seul. Pour ce faire, elle se rapproche de personnes qui restent justement reléguées aux marges de la création artistique ou d'endroits de prise de décision de manière générale, malgré des chartes d'inclusivité. L'on peut ici citer le projet The Anti-Social Social Club, Episode 1, The Chamber of the Dispossessed, qui en 2017 invite, pas tout à fait la même chose, une quarantaine d'habitants et d'habitantes du bourg de Barking et de Dagenham à s'installer dans les sièges de leurs élus à la Chambre du Conseil. L'Assemblée est animée sur la base d'un script, laissant une place importante à l'improvisation dont est issue une documentation photographique et filmique. Chabanon, actuellement en thèse et professeur à la EHESS à Genève, bénéficie d'une reconnaissance institutionnelle. Pour le projet The Anti-Social Social Club que je viens de citer, elle a reçu le prix Sciences Po d'art contemporain. Elle a également participé à la Triennale de Dunkerque et a bénéficié d'expositions monographiques au Westfälischer Kunstverein à Münster et au Bergschauburg à Bruxelles. Cependant, il importe de souligner que cette reconnaissance succède son invitation à Lafayette Anticipation. Alors, cela n'est pas pour dire que l'expérience de travail à Lafayette marque le début de la pratique ou de la carrière de l'artiste, mais plutôt de souligner que cette expérience a initié un projet de recherche sur le temps long autour des pratiques artistiques collectives, projet qui se singularise à plusieurs égards et sur lequel je m'attarderai désormais à vous présenter quelques singularités. Alors revenons donc à l'invitation des curateuristes François Quintin et Anna Collin à l'occasion de l'exposition collective « Le Centre ne peut tenir ». Afin de guider cette invitation qui est inspirée des intérêts de recherche de Chabanon, Quintin propose à l'artiste de collaborer avec l'école TOT, une association située en Île-de-France qui offre une formation diplômante en français langue étrangère à destination des réfugiés et des demandeuses d'asile non diplômés. En 2017, Chabanon est bénévole à l'association et pendant presque un an tente de définir des pistes d'action communes. Cependant, plutôt qu'un projet issu ex nihilo de ce terrain, se dessine un fil rouge. En dialoguant avec les bénéficiaires de TOT, Chabanon remarque que la question du travail, ou plutôt de l'impossibilité du travail, est un sujet récurrent, pesant, complexe et complexifié par des instances administratives et juridiques. Chabanon décide d'enquêter l'enjeu de ce qu'elle nomme la non-production dans les milieux qu'elle pratique, à savoir ceux de l'art. L'on retrouve ici le non de la non-performativité institutionnelle, le non qui empêche, qui entrave et qui dépossède. Grâce à une avocate chez TOT, Chabanon fait la connaissance d'Inès Mesmar, fondatrice de l'association La Fabrique Nomade, qui œuvre à valoriser et favoriser l'insertion professionnelle des artisans d'art, migrants et migrantes et réfugiés en France. À son tour, Mesmar présente Chabanon à Abou Dubaev, que vous voyez ici à l'écran, aux côtés de Chabanon, un artisan stuccateur ayant fui la Tchétchénie en 2014 et qui, pour cause de son statut de réfugié, éprouve une grande difficulté à trouver du travail en France. Cependant, en poursuivant les recherches auprès de l'avocate spécialisée dans les droits des travailleuses migrantes, Chabanon apprend qu'il existe des zones grises juridiques qui rendent théoriquement possible l'embauche de ces travailleuses dans les milieux de l'art et de la mode. Théoriquement possible, pas impossible. La rencontre entre Dubaev et Chabanon initie une conversation qui se façonne à bâton rompu entre l'anglais et le français, parfois aidée par la traduction de la fille de l'artisan. Dubaev décrit son expertise de travail, soit un savoir-faire qui consiste à reproduire le marbre à partir du stuc, donc une sorte de plâtre, mélangé avec des pigments et de la colle. Quoique très ancienne, cette technique se fait rare en France, où elle a été pratiquée notamment au XIXe et XXe siècle dans des palais. En se rappelant de leur première conversation, Chabanon évoque « Abou tells me that he is nostalgic for his profession's delusions of grandeur. He bought his know-how as an investment, an intangible heritage now restricted and curtailed by a lack of opportunities, access to specific materials, tools, skilled labor, or the administration required for any kind of building. » Si c'est à partir de cette rencontre que Chabanon va poursuivre sa démarche de pratique artistique collective, une telle démarche doit se façonner à l'échelle de la rencontre, de l'ensemble des participants et des participantes, Chabanon incluse, et de leur situation spécifique de vie, de travail, de leurs besoins, mais aussi de leurs envies. En aparté, je suggère que l'attention apportée à cette échelle intime de la mise en œuvre de pratiques artistiques collectives, à savoir la conception de méthodes sur mesure entre collaboratrices, pourrait nous aider à détourner des débats qui occupent beaucoup d'espace dans le domaine concernant les bonnes et mauvaises pratiques de collaboration. Fin de parenthèse. Ainsi, en même temps que Chabanon et Dubaev décident ce sur quoi elles ont envie de travailler ensemble, la question du comment travailler ensemble se pose de manière pratique, d'un point de vue légal et économique, tout autant que d'un point de vue linguistique et artistique. En effet, si la conversation entre Chabanon et Dubaev se poursuit autour de la fabrication d'un objet à partir des savoir-faire de Dubaev et des ressources matérielles auxquelles il n'a pas accès, une autre conversation émerge, menée par Chabanon auprès de l'équipe de Lafayette Anticipation. Il s'agit de négocier la transformation du budget de production alloué à l'artiste en salaire pour rémunérer Dubaev. La demande est à la fois inédite et fortement inspirée des community economies étudiées par J.K. Gibson Graham, un duo de géographes économistes féministes, et qui désigne des pratiques économiques prédominantes à l'échelle mondiale, mais sous-déterminées par le capitalisme. Engager une négociation qui fait émerger une situation, pour reprendre le terme de François Quintin, à laquelle l'institution ne s'attendait pas. C'est une manière pour Chabanon d'interroger l'incertitude embrassée par les missions de la Fondation en provoquant ce qu'implique produire une œuvre d'art dans le contexte spécifique de Lafayette Anticipation, tenant compte des contingences propres au lieu. C'est en ce sens que la méthode mise en application par Chabanon se rapproche des pratiques de performance étudiées par Shannon Jackson, celles qui make art from, not despite contingency. Or, la négociation longue soulève que la contingence n'est pas le propre de la précarité et qu'il s'agit d'ailleurs peut-être d'un construit, d'un écran de fumée pour que la non-performativité institutionnelle puisse continuer à opérer. Donc je te rejoins là-dessus, Catherine. Le travail immatériel mené à bras-le-corps par Chabanon se concrétise par une improvisation administrative pour cause de statut institutionnel. Un contrat de travail est mis en place entre Dubaev et la Fabrique Nomade qui le rémunère à partir de la somme versée à l'association par la fondation d'entreprise. La situation est tout aussi singulière pour la Fabrique Nomade qui venait à peine de voir le jour. En entretien, Inès Mesmar, sa directrice, décrit la solution trouvée comme étant à la fois expérimentale et une prise de risque. Ainsi, avant même de prendre forme, le plateau informe des méthodes et des modalités de travail. Quant à sa fabrication, celle-ci se déploie sur le temps de 5 semaines, la durée du contrat de travail de Dubaev. Je cite de nouveau Chabanon au sujet des gestes de production qui se mettent en place à Lafayette Anticipation, parfois assisté de Romain Bartel, chef de l'atelier et qu'on voit ici accroupi à côté de Dubaev. Donc Chabanon dit « We find ourselves in geology libraries, examining reproductions of marble, colors, veins, and chips. We shape a language to meet each other's needs. Then for Abu, I draw the design for cut stone, over 3 meters long and 2 meters wide. For months, we worked on creating a common territory, IA system, delving into the materials, techniques, tools, and gestures that are required, but lacking. Au moment de la production du plateau, je suis responsable de la communication de la Fayette Anticipation. Je descends dans l'atelier, documenter ces temps d'échange qui continuent à se déployer, notamment dans le faire, ou par le faire. Chabanon esquisse le plan de l'œuvre. Dubaev illustre la technique que Chabanon tente de reproduire à son tour. Ensemble, il y a le mélange, coupe, ponce, comme on le voit à l'image, frotte, nettoie. Le silence est souvent au rendez-vous, interrompu parfois par des grognements d'insatisfaction d'une tentative artistique, ou bien de gloussements de rire partagés par les collaboratrices, dont la cause m'échappe souvent. Un langage commun, en effet, qui trouve sens dans des gestes partagés. Des gestes qui se stratifient, se sédimentent, tout comme les histoires d'arrivée de chacun et de chacune des collaboratrices, et qui se dessinent tels des motifs géologiques. Le plateau devient une masse minérale. En entretien, Romain Bertel, le chef de l'atelier, revient sur ce moment de fabrication et décrit Dubaev comme étant dans son élément. Cependant, la pratique artistique collective proposée par Chabanon lui est moins familière. Ayant eu l'habitude d'œuvrer à son compte, Dubaev se confronte au travail à 4 mains. Se pose dès lors la question de la signature de l'œuvre mentionnée par Chabanon. When this comes to an end, Abu tells me that he has taught me everything I need to know about stucco marble, a fragment of heritage. I speak about co-creation, but he refuses, stating that he has fulfilled his part of the contract, meaning that he has worked according to the plans. Now, the meaning and future form of the stone are my responsibility. Ainsi, lorsque le plateau fait son apparition publique dans l'exposition Le Centre ne peut tenir, nous comprenons que ce qui apparaît, what appears, est avant tout un prétexte à l'emploi, avant même d'être un large fragment minéral. L'historien de l'art Grant Kester nomme conversation pieces les œuvres qui se construisent à partir de la facilitation du dialogue entre différentes communautés. Context rather than content providers. Dans le cas du plateau, l'envie de travailler ensemble, soit le désir moteur de l'œuvre, est conditionné par la possibilité de travailler ensemble. Ces conditions d'urgence génèrent des conversations parmi l'ensemble des personnes concernées par la production de l'œuvre. Ces échanges donnent forme aux pratiques collectives adoptées pour la fabrication de l'œuvre et prennent forme du plateau. Mais à l'instar des conversation pieces de Kester, l'on comprendra que les relations créées, les désirs communs et intérêts partagés apparaissent plus essentiels que son aboutissement formel, quel qu'il soit, pour citer la critique d'art Marie Chenel à propos du travail de Chabanon. Cette histoire d'arrivée, ainsi que les gestes et les mouvements qui le composent, ne sont pas présentés en détail au public. C'est en ce sens, si l'on revient à les lectures que propose Ahmed de Marx, que l'on pourrait avancer que l'exposition, à l'instar du processus de fétichisme, rend latent ou implicite l'histoire et les conditions d'arrivée de l'œuvre, qui, une fois installée, est signée par Chabanon en collaboration étroite avec Dubaev. Cependant, la dynamique de cette histoire ne s'arrête pas au moment de l'exposition de l'œuvre. Tout d'abord, les mouvements infrastructurels provoqués par la négociation du contrat de travail se prolongent au-delà de sa durée déterminée. Le contrat permet à Dubaev de constituer un dossier de demande de logement pour lui et sa fille, qui est accepté. La vie continue du plateau permet à la vie de ses collaboratrices de se poursuivre. L'œuvre bouge, ses collaboratrices aussi. Suite à sa participation à l'exposition collective de la Fayette Anticipation, Chabanon effectue une résidence artistique à Wellington, en Nouvelle-Zélande. Nous sommes à la veille de la pandémie du Covid. Les liens se distendent, quelle que soit la distance. Chabanon perd le contact avec Dubaev. Même s'il a été décidé que Chabanon serait responsable des prochains mouvements du plateau, désormais intégrés à la collection de la Fayette Anticipation, l'artiste aurait aimé discuter avec Dubaev de la présentation de l'œuvre à Béton Salon, un centre d'art situé dans le 13e arrondissement de Paris. Si l'invitation est celle à concevoir une première exposition personnelle ou monographique en France, nous comprenons que ces termes sont dénués de sens au regard de la pratique de Chabanon. À cette occasion, Chabanon invite Rosanna Puyol. Ici, on voit le plateau dans son nouvel espace, donc là où il a été déplacé à Béton Salon. Et des images pour illustrer ce que je vais vous raconter. Donc, à l'occasion de la présentation de l'œuvre à Béton Salon, Chabanon invite Rosanna Puyol, traductrice et fondatrice de la maison d'édition Brooke PM, à poursuivre la traduction collective des Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study, de Fred Moten et Stefano Arnay, au sein de l'exposition de Béton Salon. Donc, lors de ces séances tenues les 6 et 7 mars 2020 et auxquelles je participe, le plateau, quoique oblique, soutient nos besoins. Celui de déposer des livres et des ordinateurs, nos outils de travail, mais surtout la nécessité d'un point de rencontre pour effectuer ce travail. Afin de saisir en quoi consiste ce travail, il faut se rapprocher de ce sur quoi l'on travaille, une table, un ouvrage. Nous nous mettons à l'étude, nous activons ce que Fred Moten nomme l'intertextualité, intertextuality, c'est-à-dire la socialité inhérente et constitutive d'un texte, informé par une polyphonie de voix et de références. Le plateau soutient ainsi la traduction du texte en tant que pratique sociale, à la veille de la distanciation sociale qui nous sera imposée. L'étude des sous-communs, l'ouvrage, met les sous-communs à l'étude, soit ce que Moten qualifie de « a necessity that we have been dreaming of, but we haven't been able to enact, until we do ». Ça, c'est Moten. Le plateau permet à l'assemblée d'une dizaine de traductrices de faire l'expérience d'un faire ensemble, ne serait-ce que sur 2 jours, situation de partage que l'œuvre a déjà pu occasionner, comme nous l'avons vu avec Dubaev et Chabanon. Pour conclure, je vous propose de porter le regard aux pieds hexagonaux du plateau, fabriqués en bois contreplaqué et sur lesquels repose la surface massive et minérale fabriquée par Chabanon et Dubaev. Regardons ces pieds. 100 mugs en céramique peuplent le sol, enveloppant les pieds de l'œuvre. Chabanon se met à la céramique en Nouvelle-Zélande. L'artiste poursuit sa pratique à Bruxelles, où elle s'installe à son retour. Travailler autour devient un exercice réflexif pendant lequel Chabanon médite sur les mouvements du plateau, soit le partage du travail, le partage au travail. Et elle contemple les contradictions inhérentes aux logiques collaboratives, celles qui soutiendraient que travailler collectivement inspire de fait une horizontalité entre les participants et participantes. Or, comme la surface inclinée du plateau le préfigure déjà, les pratiques artistiques collectives ne correspondent pas à un système d'échange à part égale. S'il y a des mouvements qui se mettent en place autour du plateau, c'est à partir de la reconnaissance institutionnelle par les mondes de l'art et du droit dont bénéficie Chabanon. Les conversations puissantes et opérantes qui en découlent entre participants et participantes peuvent être interrompues, écourtées, par des conditions d'urgence qui refont surface de manière différente pour chacun et chacune d'elles. Dans le cas de Chabanon, le fait de ne pas pouvoir soutenir une conversation sur le temps long avec chacun et chacune des collaboratrices provoque parfois un sentiment d'échec quant à la réalisation d'un projet ou bien encore d'épuisement face au travail de maintenance, the maintenance work, que le projet nécessite. Et à ce sujet, Chabanon poursuit une réflexion sur les exigences économiques des pratiques artistiques collectives qui engagent souvent un travail immatériel, impayé, et sur lequel je serais heureuse de revenir plus en détail, si vous le souhaitez. Ainsi, lorsque Chabanon revient par ses propres moyens au mouvement des pratiques artistiques collectives, cela provoque un mouvement intérieur, une remise en question de sa propre pratique. Si l'artiste se retrouve à bout de force par le travail avec et autour du plateau, et il faut être vigilant et vigilante à ce retour sur expérience, nous pouvons reconnaître que le plateau lui propose également l'occasion d'approfondir ces questionnements, de continuer à se laisser mouvoir par ceux qui se déplacent. Donc, j'aimerais conclure en convoquant de nouveau la parole d'Ahmed, qui, vous l'aurez compris, est très importante pour moi. Donc, I'm returning to Ahmed to conclude. We could approach the dancing table quite differently if we see that the life of the table is given through this intimacy with other lives, rather than being a cut-off point. A table acquires a life through how it arrives, through what it comes into contact with, and the work it allows us to do. Perhaps this life is a borrowed life rather than a stolen life, where the act of borrowing involves a pledge of return. The dancing table would be for sure a rather queer object, a queerness that does not reside within the table, but registers how the table can impress on us, and what we too can borrow from the contingency of its life. Donc, au travers de cette relecture d'Ahmed, qui à son tour relit Marx, nous pouvons confirmer que this work is doing more than what appears. And it's in the doing, as a projective enterprise, in the dancing plateau, even more so than in the plateau's dance, that I find subtle movements for hope. Merci.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks to Catherine Wallerstein for inviting me to this conference. Sorry. I will speak in French, but I've circulated an English version of my text yesterday, and I have some extra copies if needed. English version. So we'll skip Ecotopia this morning. Ecotopia is a novel by Ernst Kallenbach, published in 1975. Some sort of utopian novel for those of you who don't know it. It's about actually it might be in the news today because it's about the cessation of California, Oregon, and the Washington State from the US for ecological reason. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, and I would like to show you two. Yeah, I have two slides. And they're on this screen, on the big screen. Yeah. Elles sont là. Elles ont été installées là. Non, je crois pas que ce soit ça. Non, ça doit être sur le big screen here. Bon, je vais commencer en attendant les images. Ça arrive? OK. OK, thank you. Est-ce qu'on peut voir les deux images qui ont été, les deux slides qui ont été installés sur le grand écran?
Bien sûr.
Et on va en laisser une en fond d'écran.
Parfait. Elles ont été mises, vous savez...
Sur l'écran, hein, par votre
Sur le
collègue
bureau
tout à l'heure. Oui, sur le bureau, normalement.
D'accord, je vais regarder alors. Bureau. Document.
Ça doit être Gruppo Autonomo, voilà, c'est ça, la troisième.
Celui-ci, celle-ci.
Yeah, might be this one.
D'accord, attendez, je vais juste partager d'abord l'écran. Hop là. Partager, hop. Et on va l'ouvrir.
Voilà. Ok, on peut la laisser comme
Et
fond.
celle-ci.
Oui, et l'autre. Mais on peut
L'autre, elle est
laisser.
plus petite, hein.
Oui, on va laisser la grande en fond.
Oui, ok, parfait.
Ok. Alors, donc, je vais commencer avec une question qui est est-ce que les communs, au fond, sont le dernier lieu de l'utopie aujourd'hui? Est-ce que les communs sont le dernier lieu de l'utopie aujourd'hui? Donc, j'ai travaillé à partir de l'argument du colloque. Et donc, j'entends par commun, au fond, l'ensemble des micro-espaces publics oppositionnels ou des counter public spaces dont il a été question. Donc, j'ai mis ça au fond pour pouvoir parler latin, évidemment. Donc c'est intéressant parce que c'est une formule, comme vous savez, des actes des apôtres. Hein. Les croyants vivaient ensemble et avaient tout en commun. Et depuis le début du millénaire, cette formule donc a été reprise par la gauche radicale, contemporaine et par le marxisme autonome. Donc c'est une description de l'Église primitive qui avait déjà servi de repère à toutes les utopies, hein, à l'intérieur comme à l'extérieur de l'Église. Elle avait été notamment une inspiration de Thomas Münzer, sur lequel je vais revenir, qui est le prédicateur donc, de la guerre des paysans dans l'Allemagne des années 1520. Alors on trouve ça chez des juristes italiens au XIIe siècle. Ce qui est très intéressant, c'est que c'est Wu Ming qui fait un... Oui, ça va là? Ok, merci. Okay. Ah, ok, pardon. Et donc, on retrouve... Bon, je continue. Et donc, on trouve cette expression, les juristes italiens reprennent cette expression, vous avez ça en temps de nécessité, tout est commun. Et ce qui est très intéressant, c'est que, enfin, on retrouve une sorte de... On peut demander qui parle, peut-être, non? Et donc, on retrouve cette expression de manière tout à fait inattendue dans le titre d'un récent ouvrage du poète qui a été mentionné hier, Édouard Glissant. Cette expression donne son titre à un livre qui est paru récemment en 2024 de Glissant, qui est « Dans un monde imprévisible, l'utopie est nécessaire ». Donc vous avez aussi ça dans la somme théologique de Thomas d'Aquin, qui est évidemment un défenseur de la propriété privée, mais au fond qui reconnaît qu'en cas d'extrême nécessité, le droit de propriété doit céder le pas au droit à l'existence. Hein. Donc, in necessitate sunt omnia communia. Vous avez aussi ça dans le droit de la guerre de Grotius, en 1626. Et Grotius reprend cette expression donc, du droit canonique et la met dans le droit naturel. Et qu'est-ce que ça veut dire quand il dit ça? Quand il dit « tout est commun », ça s'adapte, ça vaut pour un cas très très précis. C'est le fait que les États ne peuvent pas refuser les étrangers, hein, ne peuvent pas refuser aux étrangers de se réfugier sur leur terre dès lors que ces étrangers ont été forcés de quitter leur propre terre et sont eux-mêmes expulsés de leur foyer. Alors, pourquoi est-ce que je convoque... Qu'est-ce que Grotius vient faire ici? C'est-à-dire, est-ce que le droit naturel appartient à la galaxie de l'utopie? Quand on lit Ernst Bloch, oui. Je vous renvoie à l'entretien que vous pouvez trouver sur le web, donc l'entretien célèbre entre Adorno et Bloch, l'entretien radiophonique de 1964. Et donc Bloch distinguait deux sensibilités utopiques. Il parle de l'utopie sociale, évidemment, et puis il dit mais il y a une autre utopie, c'est le droit naturel, en tant que construction d'une condition dans laquelle les hommes ne seraient plus humiliés ni blessés. On retrouve la formule dans le texte latin de l'utopie de mort, à plusieurs reprises, etc. Ce qui est intéressant, premier point, c'est à quel moment se fait le passage historique au fond de cette locution de l'Église à la gauche radicale contemporaine. Elle se fait autour de l'an 2000, autour d'un roman, et autour, donc on on est toujours dans la question de l'utopie comme genre, autour d'un roman et autour d'un sommet du G8 qui a lieu à Gênes. Donc le passage de cette phrase de l'Église au fond au mouvement alternatif se fait sans trop de surprise en Italie. Elle se fait par l'entremise d'un roman qui s'appelle Q, hein, qui appartient à toute la mouvance de la New Italian Epic, hein, donc qui construit une histoire contrefactuelle toujours à partir de l'histoire des vaincus. Ce sont des romans quand même qui vendent entre 1 million et 200 000 exemplaires, hein, c'est énorme. Hein. Et donc c'est le collectif d'auteurs qui s'appelle aujourd'hui Wooming. Bon. Donc ce roman est publié peu avant le sommet du G8 de Gênes en 2001 en Italie. Et les auteurs de Q ont participé au fond à toutes les manifestations autour du sommet. Alors, ce que raconte le roman, c'est précisément, au fond, l'épopée de Münzer pendant 2 ans. Et donc, le roman érige, au fond, cette épopée, cette guerre des paysans, au fond, en modèle pour les luttes politiques aujourd'hui. Bon, l'expression, toujours la même, se retrouve à plusieurs reprises dans le livre. Alors, ce qui est intéressant, c'est que ce courant utopiste des communs auxquels se rattachent ces différents mouvements, c'est celui qu'a mis en lumière Bloch, philosophe des utopies, depuis l'esprit de l'utopie jusqu'aux 3 gros volumes de l'esprit de l'espérance. Bon, Bloch a fait paraître son propre Thomas Münzer en 1921, hein, c'est-à-dire juste après l'esprit de l'utopie en 1916 et bien avant le principe espérance. Alors je ne sais pas si les auteurs de Wooming pensaient faire référence au texte de Bloch, mais enfin tout ce qui se passe autour de la guerre des paysans quand même a une longue histoire philologique et historiographique dans les débats entre, au fond, marxisme et socialisme utopique. Puisque Engels a écrit une guerre des paysans en 1850, dans lequel, comme vous pouvez vous y attendre, la dimension religieuse de la révolte est considérée comme tout à fait secondaire. Et donc le texte de Bloch est une réponse, évidemment, à ce marxisme-là. Alors, Münzer, pourquoi Münzer? Au fond, il y a 2 questions, c'est-à-dire que chez Bloch, au fond, c'est la religion sécularisée, hein, qui permet d'identifier le principe espérance. Ça, c'est le premier point. Et d'autre part, c'est toute la question des traces du passé, c'est-à-dire, au fond, comment tout ça peut être réactivé aujourd'hui. Et donc Bloch conclut son livre en évoquant par exemple les premières hérésies chrétiennes et la mystique rationnelle de Tolstoï. Bon, alors je coupe la citation, vous l'avez, vous pouvez vous y référer. Donc Fred Jameson disait qu'il y avait une double descendance de Thomas More. Bon, la première, évidemment, c'est celle qu'on connaît tous, c'est au fond la réalisation du programme utopiste. Et pour citer une exposition qui, je pense, ne pourrait plus avoir lieu aujourd'hui sous ce titre-là, qui s'est tenue il y a à peine une vingtaine d'années, exactement comme à la même date que le sommet de Gênes. On a eu une exposition à la fois à la New York Public Library et à la Bibliothèque nationale de France qui s'appelait La quête d'une société idéale en Occident. Bon, donc c'est ça évidemment qu'on identifie traditionnellement à la question de l'utopie. Et puis la seconde veine, au fond, identifie une pulsion utopiste qui serait présente partout et qui trouve à s'exprimer donc dans nombre de pratiques et d'expressions. Donc la première, c'est celle dont vous avez parlé hier, c'est-à-dire c'est la forme fermée de l'utopie. Hein. C'est sphérique. C'est celle où les désirs et les besoins correspondent absolument. Donc dans les pays pauvres, c'est une excellente chose. Dans les pays où on consomme, c'est extrêmement problématique parce que c'est asymptotique. Donc la clôture, la totalité, sont des choses qui sont des formes qui sont absentes chez Bloch. Lui rattache l'utopie, je crois que c'est très nouveau, parce qu'on ne trouve ça auparavant que chez Fourier, il rattache l'utopie à des facteurs subjectifs. Et évidemment, entre les utopies du XIXe siècle et aujourd'hui, il peut s'appuyer sur la théorie des pulsions de Freud. Et donc il parle de l'insatisfaction il parle beaucoup du corps aussi. Il n'y a pas beaucoup d'utopies qui parlent du corps, sauf quand il s'agit de les dresser. Bon. Et donc l'imagination face à l'existant, c'est le sentiment éprouvé que quelque chose manque. Etwas fehlt. Et donc ça, il reprend cette phrase à Brecht. Donc ça forme le terreau de la conscience utopique. Je cite dans le principe espérance, l'existence meilleure, c'est d'abord en pensée qu'on l'amène. Donc il est le penseur de l'utopie concrète, du non encore advenu. Et donc il explique que les rêves éveillés, par exemple, ça indique l'aspiration à une vie meilleure, tout comme les idéaux moraux, etc. Et donc là-dedans s'exprime l'espoir, au fond, un espoir, une espérance contre la résignation face au statu quo. Donc il y a souvent des mots valises chez lui, et il dit que la conscience utopique ne se contente pas des images de consolation, Trostbilder, mais qu'elle s'attache à des images souhaits, Wunschbilder, qui cherchent à donner au dépassement du réel une forme concrète. C'est-à-dire, au fond, à l'inscrire dans la matérialité du monde. Alors, dans le principe espérance, vous avez cette théorie assez formidable de la conscience anticipée. Il était question hier des temporalités, des déplacements de temporalité. Donc, vous avez à la fois chez lui une conscience anticipante, et puis vous avez aussi une conscience des anachronicités. On cite toujours Benjamin quand on veut parler de ça, mais en fait, bon, derrière, il y a Bloch. Et quand vous lisez un livre très politique, Héritage de ce temps, sur le fascisme et le nazisme qui est apparu en 1935, c'est de ça dont il s'agit. C'est-à-dire, c'est le contraire de l'utopie. C'est comment, au fond, il y a des choses non contemporaines, très anciennes, les diables du Moyen-Âge, qui passent dans le présent. Alors, je vais sauter parce que c'est un peu long. Ce qui est intéressant aussi, c'est qu'il va assez loin, parce qu'il explique que, au fond, la politique, contrairement à la vision de l'utopie qui existe jusqu'à lui, et notamment chez les marxistes, il étend beaucoup le spectre de ce qu'il appelle les Wunschbilder, les images souhaits. Il dit parce que la politique, le conte politique est responsable d'avoir canalisé l'utopie dans une voie impropre à sa matière fondamentale, qui perce dans tous les domaines de l'expérience. Donc il va trouver une sorte d'aura utopiste qui entoure par exemple des nouveaux vêtements, des publicités, des magazines illustrés, évidemment, des choses plus connues pour nous, l'excès festif du marché annuel et du cirque, les contes de fées, pas de feu, mais aussi le colportage, et évidemment la littérature de voyage, mais aussi la brocante, ruines et musées, etc. Et imagination utopique présente effectivement dans la danse, dans la pantomime, dans le cinéma, ou le théâtre. Bon, alors là, peut-être où c'est le moins original, parce qu'il ne se différencie pas de l'esthétique de la théorie critique et de l'école de Francfort. Au fond, il affecte à tous les symboles esthétiques une seule et même signification. Je cite, c'est un possible allusivement réalisé. Bon, ce qui est intéressant, c'est la question du possible, c'est-à-dire que au fond, cette philosophie de l'espérance, elle réhabilite la notion d'utopie en se déployant comme une herméneutique du possible, c'est-à-dire comme une méthode d'interprétation des signes du possible au sein du réel. Vous vous souvenez peut-être que la formule qui commence le principe d'espérance, c'est « il s'agit d'apprendre à espérer ». Alors, sur la question du possible, je n'ai pas fait une grande recherche bibliographique, mais il y a un assez bon livre qui est paru en France il y a 2 ans qui s'appelle « La perspective du possible ». Comment penser ce qui peut nous arriver et ce que nous pouvons faire. Et un des 2 auteurs, Laurent Jean-Pierre, avait par ailleurs écrit, qui est un politiste, avait par ailleurs écrit un livre intéressant sur le phénomène des gilets jaunes. Voilà. Alors, Bloch participe, je dirais, à cette nébuleuse, cette génération de philosophes allemands du XXe siècle qui ont été des penseurs de la technique, qui ont au début été évidemment proches pour cette raison de Heidegger et qui s'en sont éloignés très vite. Mais en tout cas, pour qui la technique moderne ne pouvait plus être pensée de façon instrumentale ou neutre. Ce sont aussi des gens qui ont été marqués par la philosophie de l'histoire de Hegel et donc conscients de la question de la sécularisation. Mais ils sont habités, je dirais, ils restent habités par une passion de la transcendance qui leur fait vraiment éprouver tout ce qu'en français, enfin on traduit Weber comme ça, toute la question du désenchantement. Donc ils sont demeurés métaphysiciens car ils ont la nostalgie d'un monde autre, autre que celui des intérêts et des calculs, autre que celui des nécessités. Et donc ça les maintient en contact avec 2 questions qui ont été pour eux constantes, la question de l'infini, en tant qu'ouverture et pure altérité, et ensuite la promesse, en tant qu'accomplissement toujours à venir. Et donc le désir, c'est à la fois anti-hegelien, puis ça reprend Kant, au fond ça les conduit à réinvestir, une sorte de réinvestissement de l'espérance dans la philosophie. Alors, ce sont des... Habermas leur avait consacré un grand texte en 61, Der deutsche Idealismus der jüdische Philosophen. Et en France, Pierre Bourretz leur a amené à leur propos une vaste enquête, il y a 20 ans, qui a donné lieu à un livre monumental, c'est 800 pages, qui s'appelle « Témoins du futur, philosophie et messianisme ». Et Bourretz explique très bien que l'un des puissants motifs de l'utopie chez Bloch, c'est son refus de Hegel, c'est-à-dire la manière dont, au fond, Hegel, se réconcilie trop vite avec le monde. Je cite l'esprit de l'utopie, la doctrine de Hegel selon laquelle tout ce qui est rationnel est déjà réel conclut une paix totale et prématurée avec le monde. Alors, ces témoins du futur sont en même temps les penseurs des sombres temps, pour reprendre une autre expression de Brecht. C'est-à-dire tous n'ont pas connu Auschwitz, mais ceux qui ont connu ou continué d'écrire ont pensé dans son ombre. Donc, dans le principe de responsabilité, qui date de 1979, Jonas, donc on le sait, s'est livré une critique en règle de l'idéal utopique chez Marx et chez Bloch. je cite, « idéal utopique qui, avec le progrès technologique actuel, est devenue la plus dangereuse des tentations de l'humanité. » Dans ses souvenirs, Jonas a développé les implications politiques de son ouvrage. Et il parle de la renonciation aux utopies, ainsi que le scepticisme envers la capacité de la démocratie à faire face aux défis de l'avenir. Je cite encore, c'est un peu plus long. La première requête de l'utopie est l'abondance matérielle permettant de satisfaire les besoins de tous. La seconde, la facilité de s'approprier cette abondance, car l'essence formelle de l'utopie elle-même, c'est le loisir. Donc on est parfaitement en terrain connu, hein. Et le loisir ne peut subsister qu'avec de l'aisance, c'est-à-dire avec une certaine abondance assurée des biens vitaux. Et l'abondance doit être facilement accessible, c'est-à-dire sans effort ou avec un léger effort, car le loisir, c'est précisément d'être libéré de la servitude du travail, principe de responsabilité. Or, les ressources naturelles sont limitées. Et donc la question, je le cite, n'est pas de savoir combien l'homme sera encore à même de faire, mais de savoir ce que la nature peut supporter. Et donc il traite longuement du problème de l'énergie voilà, et de l'environnement auquel les philosophes ne s'étaient guère intéressés jusqu'à lui. Donc il cite en particulier, il cite notamment la célèbre phrase du livre 3 du Capital sur le royaume de la liberté et de la nécessité. Et donc Jonas récuse absolument ça, c'est-à-dire qu'il dit que le royaume de la liberté n'est pas séparable de celui de la nécessité. Donc il dit que c'est ça l'erreur de base chez Marx comme chez Bloch, c'est la séparation du royaume de la liberté et de la nécessité. Alors, il parle aussi de l'utopie marxiste, il charge beaucoup la barque, hein, évidemment. Il parle de l'utopie marxiste comme une eschatologie sécularisée. Et ça pour deux raisons. D'une part parce que on ne sait pas ce que sera ce royaume de la liberté, de même que vous ne savez pas ce que c'est que le paradis. Et d'autre part parce que, je le cite, la foi règne seule dans ce qui est totalement inconnu. Donc il dit qu'il faudrait vérifier que l'homme authentique n'a pas encore été manifesté, ne s'est pas encore manifesté jusqu'à l'heure actuelle. Et là, il s'en prend au fond à deux choses. Il s'en prend à l'ontologie de Bloch, c'est-à-dire la doctrine du pas encore, du caractère inauthentique de tout l'humain préalable. Et il s'en prend évidemment aussi à cette idée marxiste de préhistoire de l'humanité, c'est-à-dire l'idée que l'humanité n'est pas encore arrivée. Une phrase assez forte, c'est... Alors, parmi les phrases très fortes, il parle de veto de la nature contre l'utopie. Et une autre phrase assez forte aussi, enfin une pensée plutôt forte, l'erreur de l'utopie est donc une erreur de l'anthropologie qu'elle présuppose, une erreur de la conception de l'essence de l'homme. Bon. Donc le problème du rapport entre philosophie et politique, pour lui, est le suivant. Comment pouvons-nous vivre avec la nature ? Ou comment la nature peut-elle subsister avec nous? Et donc il ajoute qu'il n'écarte réellement qu'une seule chose en matière de philosophie politique, l'utopisme. Nous ne pouvons nous permettre l'utopie d'un accomplissement de l'humain, d'une réalisation finale de la société idéale. Il y réside même un danger. Premièrement, c'est un objectif arrogant. Et deuxièmement, il peut, dans les conditions actuelles, nous conduire à notre perte, pour autant qu'il attise les espérances des hommes au lieu de les modérer. C'est l'argument que j'opposais au principe espérance d'Ernst Bloch. Alors, le culte de la technique est enfin associé chez lui à ce qu'il appelle le point de vue de l'anthropocentrisme le plus extrême. Donc, ce qui fait que la critique de l'utopie lui sert à fonder une alternative à, je cite, l'euphorie prométhéenne post-baconienne, puisque ça commence avec Bacon pour lui. Bon. Dans le chapitre 5, il aborde l'idée de progrès. Il énonce ainsi son credo. La nouvelle obligation qui est la nôtre aujourd'hui revient, je cite, à une éthique de la conservation, de la préservation, de l'empêchement, et non à une éthique du progrès et du perfectionnement. Quand je disais que ces penseurs s'étaient éloignés d'Heidegger, dans la critique de la technique chez Heidegger, il n'y a jamais d'éthique. Bon. Alors je vais conclure. On a souvent critiqué au fond, cette critique de l'utopie, surtout quand le livre est paru il y a une quarantaine d'années. On a critiqué cette critique de l'utopie par Jonas, au fond en expliquant qu'elle participerait du discrédit de l'utopie, auquel on assiste depuis une quarantaine d'années. Alors, bon, tout ça c'est des querelles entre philosophes, je pense que c'est un peu dépassé. Et surtout, je crois que cette critique de Jonas manque l'essentiel. Et elle nie l'évidence de l'actualité de sa pensée. Donc le scepticisme quant à l'avenir est omniprésent aujourd'hui dans la théorie politique. Et le pessimisme donc est de mise dans la plupart des travaux récents. L'espérance, dans la mesure où elle paraissait conditionnée par l'avenir et par la possibilité d'un avenir, a souvent été associée à l'optimisme, c'est-à-dire à l'attente d'un monde meilleur. Et donc elle a aussi été victime de la mort supposée ou annoncée de l'avenir. Alors je vais citer quelqu'un que vous connaissez tous, je pense, qui est Wendy Brown, donc l'une des politistes les plus affûtées aujourd'hui. C'est dans un entretien qu'elle a accordé en 2018, où elle dit « Il est difficile, elle ne vise pas Bloch, je pense qu'elle vise Raymond Williams et David Harvey. Donc elle dit « Il est difficile d'avoir de l'espoir aujourd'hui, mais notamment au regard de l'action. » Et donc elle dit, je cite, je continue, donc vous avez le texte en anglais, je pense que nous avons besoin de courage, de détermination et de responsabilité plutôt que d'espoir. Donc selon une formule célèbre, souvent répétée du comte de Saint-Simon, qui est un socialiste utopique français du XIXe siècle que vous connaissez, il écrit ça en 1820. L'idée d'utopie ne signifie rien d'autre que notre incertitude. Alors, je vous livre cette hypothèse. L'utopie aujourd'hui ne désigne plus la quête d'une société idéale ou d'un autre monde, mais simplement la possibilité d'avoir un avenir et un futur dans ce monde. Voilà.
Thank you very much to all three of you. I think what we'll do is we'll open this up to the audience for questions. We'll try to take a round of 3 questions, and then we'll have responses, and we'll go backwards and forwards like that. So, are there questions? I mean, I know there are questions, but put your hands up and ask them.
Cette question, c'est pour Philippe Roussan. Et c'est sur ce parcours. Oui, comme vous voulez. Okay. So this question is for Philippe Roussan, and it's about the development of Bloch, really, and his relation to Utopia, and how that relates to his changes of style and the changes of the technique of his discourse. So, comme cette question de la technique, c'est aussi la technique de son discours, sa manière d'agir comme écrivain. Bloch, in his first work, those works you were quoting around the big, I mean, just before the war, the First World War, were published just with First World War, has a very expressionist style, a way of working very different from the kind of style he would develop in the L'Esprit d'Espérance. And I was wondering, you were mentioning le mot valise, so the portmanteau kind of thing. I was wondering more broadly in the importance that montage acquired as a method of the historian and of the thinker. He has this idea that this kind of permanent interrogation, what happens is all reality is conceived as discontinuity. I agree with you that his conscience anticipatoire, so his, how would you say that in English? In Bloch, anticipatory conscience. And I mean, predates very Benjaminian terms like dialectic image and the jet site, the time maintenant, I mean the now time or whatever, how it's translated. And this whole like kind of economy of finding signals of the possible in the real. And in this kind of horizon where you put technique as a form of symbolization rather than as a utile, an instrument. And I was wondering how much of this montage is what actually opens this new transcendence in Bloch, which is like a transcendence in immanence. So they are asking facticity, the event, the opening into a transcendence, but it's a transcendence that is not search abroad in a sort of a spiritual reality, but is rather search in a kind of explosion in immanence, the event, which obviously has this conjunction with the infinite, because it's an open figure where they are searching more polyvalence and less intentionality than in normal kinds of synthesis. So there has this kind of, it's not a closed figure, it's not a discrete way of using discourse in montage, but an open to infinity is a dynamic figure. So I was wondering how that also has to do with, you were marking the, I'm finishing now, sorry about this long question, but you were marking this kind of German scene, but it's a German scene that moved precisely in Benjamin, in Bloch. I mean, Bloch is more complex because he went to the States and then to Germany, Eastern Germany. And obviously, I mean, away from Heidegger, it's a scene that also was a move from expressionism to a kind of language of the avant-garde taken by theory, and taken by theory in a very conscious way, in Benjamin, in Bloch, and especially the principle of montage. So that was my question for you.
Do you mind if I answer in French?
No. I mean, to what you just answered. You need the microphone, yeah.
Merci. Alors, bon, merci beaucoup pour la question. Enfin, il y a 3 questions, je pense. Sur la question des mots valises, effectivement, Wunschbilder, Trotzbilder, enfin bon, au fond, ça vaut comme concept, hein, ce sont des beaux images qui valent comme des concepts. Bon, moi, je n'ai pas beaucoup pensé au montage, mais par exemple, dans Héritage de ce temps, qui est donc le livre sur où il est le plus question des rapports de l'art et de la politique et de l'époque, hein, c'est-à-dire l'entre-deux-guerres en Allemagne, enfin bon. Il y a quelque chose de l'ordre du passage, effectivement, de l'expressionnisme comme style lyrique, hein, au surréalisme. Bon, alors il parle du montage, mais pas tout à fait. C'est pas du tout c'est pas exactement le rapport que Benjamin a au surréalisme. Alors, sur la question de la conscience anticipante, je crois que bon, à partir au fond, pour lui, l'utopie, c'est pas tellement un espace. Hein, c'est un espace pour lui, c'est toujours ce que vous avez montré hier, c'est-à-dire c'est la sphère, c'est fermé. Donc l'utopie, c'est jamais une cité, c'est jamais une ville, c'est jamais une forme fermée. L'utopie, c'est pas un espace, dans la mesure où il dit que ça commence au fond en pensée, hein, ça veut dire que l'utopie est toujours liée à la question du temps. C'est-à-dire, ce qui est très très intéressant, c'est un décrochage des temps. C'est-à-dire qu'il n'y a plus de temps unique et linéaire. Hein. Il peut y avoir des avancées, des retards dans le temps. Et donc, j'ai l'impression que chez lui, souvent, l'utopie, c'est ça, c'est ce décalage entre les temps. Hein. Voilà.
C'est là que le message est très important comme langage qui apprend à détruire la linéalité du temps et de lire les temps d'une manière réversible. C'est-à-dire, ouais.
Très bien.
Okay, yeah, I have a question. I mean, I have just two comments and then a question for Ozge. The first, I mean, the comments, I mean, I'm struck by the concept of slow time and slowing down of time. You mentioned in the park versus outside of the park, and having participated in a number of encampments and sort of certainly Occupy. I was very involved in Occupy Oakland and anyway, other movements. I mean, I know what you're talking about, and there is something incredibly important to that slowing down of time. Also, the human microphone, of course, is a slowing down of time, and that just I don't have anything particular to say about that, but it has an importance. And the other comment is the importance of slogans. You know, we are the 99% became such a huge slogan and became kind of commonplace even outside of the movement. Like it really did seep into a larger consciousness in the same way that Another World Was Possible, I think, did, but perhaps even more so. And I'm just almost thinking about it for the first time, how important, you know, how powerful a few words can be to really shift mass consciousness. So those are my two just comments. And my question was about the separation of groups in Gezi Park, which I thought was really, I guess I knew that, but I had forgotten. I'm curious about that choice and how that works. I mean, obviously people must belong to multiple groups, right? You can be gay and Kurdish and whatever. And I'm wondering were there organized discussions between the groups about commonalities and differences? I'm just wondering what the organized and unorganized interactions were and how much division there really was, and et cetera, between the groups. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the first, the slowness in the parks. I did not have that experience in Occupy Wall Street because I was in New York, but I couldn't get in the park because of the police blockage. And I'm not American, so it seemed dangerous to me, so I preferred to stay out, but I tried. So I don't know myself. I don't know. I did not experience myself the slowness in the park, but I had many interviews. So this idea of slowness, it existed when I interviewed people, and I did not ask about it. It just came out, like the mapping practices. I did not really think about it before interviewing people. But it was my experience in Gezi movement, and it came out in interviews as well. And it was really interesting about this difference between the slow-paced environment in the park, Gezi Park, And outside the park, people were, there was one interviewee, a young student, she explained the difference with some images, very utopic images, actually, imagination. She was explaining inside, like, full of pink clouds. And I don't remember now, but I have all the citation. And outside with, like, really dark and dangerous place. So there was also that kind of imaginative differentiation between, aligned with the temporal difference. Yes, also people's mic, it changed a lot, how people interacted. And also, I think it was Michael Tosig who was telling that the people's mic experience, it eliminated, canceled the leader position, charismatic idea of charismatic leader in a social movement, in a protest. So it was just that kind of experience. The same experience, in Ingezi, there were not they were not called general assemblies, they were called forums. I think it came from social forum, maybe, probably, I don't know why. And it did not only happen in Gezi Park, because Gezi Park it happened also, but very much chaotic. And there could be a violent attack anytime. In fact, my father was hurt. Like, I had to bring him to the hospital because he had to jump from 3 meters while escaping. And he just visited the park. He wasn't like a participant, so it happens. I went there every day, nothing happened to me. But yeah. And so there was this feeling of danger, and there was so much noise also in the park. The forums in Gezi, they happened in other parks of Istanbul and in other cities. Almost in every park, the neighborhood organized forums. And people, like, I joined a forum in my neighborhood, for example, in another park. And in every park, almost in every park, there was a forum every evening during the movement. And movement was happening, and they stayed off there also. And finally, with time, they disappeared because of the political environment, of course. And the separation of the groups in Gezi, it happened very naturally. So there was not at the beginning at that kind of, you will stay here, this is your place. There was not a real organization committee. There was a group full of activists and activist groups and NGOs, like more than 110 groups of people. They were taken the name Taksim Solidarity. And the most prominent members of Taksim Solidarity are in prison now for life because of organizing, because they're terrorists to the government. And there are architects, there are urban planners, because basically, if you think, it was just for the reason that the protest started because of this idea of destroying a park, green space, and because of the urban transformation in that neighborhood. So the architects, the urban planners were really there. They were the first 50 people starting the protests. So these are the most people who are in prison also right now. And the separation of groups, it happened naturally, organically, and with time. The most important separation, it was not exactly the map that I showed you. It was very sharp separations. It wasn't the case, of course, but there was. Like, I could tell someone, because it's very big, the park, and I would tell someone, okay, I'm gonna be in the opera house. In front of the opera house, or I could say I'm with the state theater, in front of the state theater stand. I could say I'm on the side of the Kurdish So I could meet people in that way because of this, thanks to this separation also. The most important separation was between the Turkish nationalists groups and Kurdish. They were all like the opposite parts of the the park. One is on the like Kurdish people were all the time dancing. There's a dance called halay. It's Turkish, Kurdish, like all this geography actually shares this dance. It's like Sirtaki of Greek people. You can imagine in this way. It's a group collective dance, and they were all the time dancing, and people were just like walking by and joining to the dance, and they were like 24 hours dance, halay going on there, and that was a real separation. And I never experienced myself, but I knew that there were some kind of conflicts, discussions in the park. This is why the organizers of like the Taksim Solidarity Group helped them to stay separate. But it did not really matter because for a discussion, it's enough to have two people. So it may start from a discussion among two people, and then it becomes bigger because the issues regarding Kurdish people and this Turkish people, it is in this society. It stays. It doesn't disappear. So it was there still in the park. What has changed that moment was that people were against the police, they were together. So maybe they had their own conflicts, but they were together in the resistance against the police, the government law enforcement, and the president now, like the prime minister then, against his discourses, because they actually shared the discourses that used by the prime minister. So he did not separate the Kurdish or the Turkish or the like the LGBT. To him, everyone was a looter, and they are trying to destabilize his power. In that sense, they were together against the power, like the political power. And I think that's all I can say. Let me think. Slogans. Yeah, it's important because I want to mention, yes, we're the 99% was for Occupy Wall Street. It was very important, and it was written everywhere and used in the drawings everywhere. But in Taksim also, in Gezi also, there was another slogan used. Everywhere is resistance, everywhere is Taksim. Taksim is the name of the neighborhood. So here we can see more like in both slogans, we can see the assemblage of people. But in the slogan, Gezi's slogan, we can also see this idea of space. Everywhere is as a resistance space. It starts from Taksim, but it doesn't mean it stays there. This is why it was it was all over the country, in every park, most of the cities. I think 95% of the cities were in that kind of occupied by the activists in that period.
Yeah, just in the same way, just the concept of occupy, occupy debt, occupy. I mean, it's sort of that also.
Yes, exactly.
Got used very, outside of the movement and really spread.
And also, like, for example, when I interviewed people from Occupy Wall Street, they also mentioned that after the all this wave of Occupy movements, also Occupy Sandy happened. So the same activists, they went to form another network of solidarity to support the people. Yeah.
we have time for more questions. I have a question for the group. I can abuse my position as chair and ask a question. I mean, I'm struck in all three papers. I do have to say, Madeleine, I struggle to follow you. So if I misunderstood you, you know, there is, as Mika Bell would argue, misreading is a form of reading. So let me misread you as well. The centrality of Hannah Arendt in papers today, but yesterday as well, I found really, really interesting. And especially when we think of this around, you know, the space of appearance, around questions of responsibility, and her reworking of the concept of freedom on freedom, where freedom really emerges in an act. And then once it emerges, almost from a no place, it's not, in other words, freedom doesn't emerge as an intentionality. It emerges conjuncturally. There's a possibility that arrives that you can make an act in, and that act can produce freedom. And then responsibility kicks in as to what do you do with it? Where does it go? And that ties into this question around slogans, because we are the 99%. That's Trump. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you know, the Republican right takes that and says, well, actually, the division isn't wealth. It's these elites who think they can tell us what we are supposed to think. And then the 99% becomes those that are not elite, including Trump, who's apparently not elite in that formulation. So you know, I mean, so that's the danger of the slogan, and where responsibility, you know, where the metal hits the flesh of responsibility, right? So you have this slogan that produces a possibility of freedom, but it can be captured. And how do we work on that? So it's not a possibility, so it's not a possibility of like future potential. It's a possibility of action now only, I think, which is, yeah. I don't know if that, and if, yeah, so I was just wondering if the panel as a whole could, because I think each of your papers speaks to that problematic. So.
You want to start or next time?
Go ahead.
Okay, so when you were talking about we are the 99% and Trump and the Republicans, I thought about, you know, Gezi was in 2013 and it was 15, I was 16. There was an attempted coup d'etat in Turkey. I was in Turkey, Istanbul, that moment. And after this coup d'etat, like not after, during actually, people went out. Different people. So it's not the we, another we went out to protect their president. And interestingly, one of the first things they did, like during the night and in the morning, they started to occupy parks. Especially one park in Istanbul, not Gezi Park, of course, because it was closed like in 10 minutes to avoid anyone occupy Gezi Park. Still today, for the anniversaries, they block Gezi Park. It's not a public park anymore. It's closed for a month. Anyway, they occupied the parks, and they used the very similar slogans to Gezi resistance to claim for themselves, of course, for different reasons, for different people, for another type of injustice also. So it was really interesting, but I think it's a way of moving forward also to discover new experiences for different people in society. So we actually told, like, if occupying was so that bad, why are you occupying this space right now? So we were asking this, but it was an interesting moment. It's just I don't know what to say, but we had this similar kind of transformation in Turkey as well.
So I'll admit that I'm not a fully fledged reader of Arendt, but I'll do my best to pick up on what you offered and make a connection. So maybe for the sake of clarity, I'll also in turn propose a brief synthesis in English of my main argument, which is, so I showed you this image of a work of art that looks like this oblique inclined table, or what Sarah Ahmed, or what I compare to what Sarah Ahmed calls a queer table. And I'm concerned with what the appearance or the apparition of this, or the public entrance of this work in an exhibition space potentially cuts off in terms of its history of arrival, which Ahmed claims is a constitution or composition of gestures, movements, a dynamic, basically. And this, she proposes this, she revisits Marx. And so there's an interesting comparison that can be drawn between Marx's fetishization of the commodity and then what an art exhibition might do to a work of art, which is maybe decontextualize it from its history of arrival. So I return to the history of production of the piece that I showed you as it was co-produced by an artist with a legal status in Europe and an artist who has the legal status of a refugee, and who has a certain amount of know-how and skill set, very technical skill set, which is left latent by a situation of non-production due to his legal status. And so that generates, actually, their desire to co-produce, to work together, generates a set of infrastructural movements within the institution by which the artist with the legal status has to negotiate, or chooses to negotiate, a working contract or workers' contract for her collaborator, Abu, for the duration of the production of the piece, thereby transforming the artistic budget to which the artist is endowed into a salary for the artist. So here we could perceive a form of community economy that the artist is concerned with as they read J.K. Gibson Graham. So I think I'll stop there for the synthesis and maybe get to the answer, which is that in my concern coming from performance studies, in the movements of labor that labor entails, but also the movements that are produced by virtue of working in this non-normative way, or in this way that inconveniences the institution. The artist fashions modes of collective praxis or artistic praxis that are specific to their interlocutor. I use their because their pronouns are they, them. And so instead of coming in with a set of preconceived notions about what collaboration might mean in art and what it might look like and what those gestures might be, entailing perhaps a de facto like horizontality amongst collaborators, the artist, so the artist named Eve Chabanon, chooses to maybe look more specifically into who their audience is, or who their desired collaborator is, in this case, Abu Jubaev. So for me, if we're looking at this question of freedom not as an intentionality, but as a response, or this possibility even of a future potential that has to be catered on a very specific level on the scale of the participants, and of where they're coming from, where they're speaking from, and what their respective forms of privilege, what we might call more commonly privilege, is. And that's never going to be a total equal transaction or transmission. But I'm concerned with with the way that the artist does not necessarily come in with a slogan, which here might be compared to these pre-established tools, skills or tool set of collaborative practice, but applies the desire for collective praxis into the making of very site-specific, made-to-measure methods and modalities of creative praxis. And for me, the movement, the movement of freedom, or the leeway that might come out of that, is what's of interest. I don't know in any way if that responds to your question, but yeah, that's kind of what I'm interested in. And maybe there are resonances with Arendt, and I should do more homework. Thanks.
Okay, two remarks. There is a very good book in French by Zoe CRAL, and the title is Poetics of the Revolutionary Slogan. It's about she studied the Egyptian slogan during the Arab Springs, and she has a huge corpus of all the slogans that appeared on Tahrir Plaza between 2011 and 2014, and the way they are born, sometimes from old poetry, and il y a des arbres avec des slogans. So this is a very good book. And about the other way around, the misuse of slogan. I was mentioning Q, the Wuming novel. So in Q, the main protagonist is constantly fighting with the general controller of the Catholic Inquisition. They never meet except at the end of the novel. And this general controller, his name is Q3. And it's from this Q, after this Q, that appeared the Q completist network. So it was exactly you know what I mean? There was no Q before this fiction.
Pat, do you have a question?
I'm not sure if I do, but I want you to complete the thought there. So how did that happen? So it seems to me that you just gave an example of some sort of turn, right? Before Q, it was a fiction, yeah. Yeah. So how though? What's the So I guess in a sociological standpoint, like what's the accomplishment there? But maybe we don't know. But I'm just saying there's something in that space that seems to be informative, and I'd love to hear your interpretation of what's in that space. What happened in that turn? What's the turn?
C'est exactement la même chose que ce qui se passe avec le terme de liberté aujourd'hui.
It's in English, please.
It's exactly the same thing about what's happening today with the word free speech. So the women created a character with a bad hero, huh? And I mean the alt-right network, I mean, took this character and this name and turned it just the other way around.
Yes, and so I think there's a conversation here. It's performance of culture. I think culture is the turn. I think. Can you say more? I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name. I should say it's the one thing. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. It's a performativity. It's culture. There's something. Yeah. There.
There is something about culture that we are sharing. All our papers share. Yeah.
I mean, there is conflict within the public space for the hegemony on words and on slogans. That's the recurrent thing. I mean, especially in these kinds of periods where there is a high degree of polarity, political polarity, cultural polarity. So, for instance, in France or in Europe, the alt-right knows how to use Gramsci at the moment, and the left doesn't know anymore. I mean, the left is crying with Benjamin.
I was going to say. I mean Gramsci provides this sort of analysis of culture, sort of right, yeah, of power.
Not of culture.
But
we are left with culture because we don't have the power anymore.
That's right. Well, but I mean, he somehow combines power and culture, I think. Yeah. So that's, and I think that's the analysis here. It's like how is power and culture articulated in that space, that turn, and I think there's space for performance in that. I mean, which is to, to connect it to our theme, our topic of utopia, right? So which is a kind of, maybe what you were saying yesterday, Andres. It's like sort of this capacity, right? It's sort of creating a capacity for, to act otherwise.
I want just to add something that thinking about what you were saying, power and culture. No, you were stressing culture. Yeah. I think also to stress culture is very much of a U.S. Way of, at least in anthropology, cultural anthropology comes from the U.S. In Europe is much stronger, another kind, for example, social anthropology. And I think it's not by chance, because I think in the U.S. Not we. Have been dealing with the identity all over. The obsession with identity has been for forever, and it was important, obviously. But now it's so strong that completely. Trump doesn't care about culture. Trump doesn't care about identity. Trump just cares about his own business.
I want to clarify.
Yeah.
I really should say cultural studies, which is a different.
Okay, that's different. Yeah. No, but what I'm saying is, because it's important, I think also in the presentation, etc. And the fact that, for example, someone like Kamala Harris stressed at the beginning, the very short beginning of her campaign, identity, and then progressively she understood that she was not going to go anywhere. It was too late. But it tells a lot about what you're saying, no? What point of view you're going to go with, politically speaking, when you use culture.
Are there any other questions for the panel? Or, I mean, I think we can have this conversation over lunch. I mean, to quote my friend, a good friend of mine who, well, I won't give you his name, I'll call him G. There's a question? A short question? I will go to the IRA after this.
No, thank you for all presentations. I have a question for you, Rushing. I was wondering about how, if you think about Jonas, how Jonas have this argue against utopical thinking in blog, because it's not a risk of paralyzed paralyzing. How do you say paralyzing? The utopical thinking when we say that hope is not is in the unexpected thinking. How do you conceive this think of hope in Jonas' responses? No, how do you say responsive? No. Réponse? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm trying to make my best.
I don't think I said that Jonas was making a critique of the notion of hope. I just said that he was making a very strong critique of the utopian ideal. So he tried to separate this. I mean, to separate hope from the whole galaxy of utopian thinking. This is Wendy Brown, which I quoted at the end of the talk, who said 6 years ago, it's hard to think with hope today. I mean, we don't need hope to think what's happening. We don't know what's happening. We don't have the concept to think what's happening. But hope is not the good concept. That's all.
Yes, just that if I was wondering if there is maybe a paradox in utopical concept, because if we don't have utopical concept outside of reality, so we put like an unexpected moment or what is in the future, or something that we don't know. Okay, but it's not a risk in that kind of concept of utopical meaning, because the desire in slogan or publicity is used like something that is we don't know or we are having, but how can we think? So how can we think the utopical concept? Because I think that maybe if we say the utopic term is not outside, but it's like paralyzing time that we just abandon the project, the social project, the common, the common space. I think that if we abandon the utopical concept of, I don't know, is unhope. I don't know that that word is function.
So I looked up the reference to Wendy Brown that was in your paper. This is what she says about hope. Hope. She says, I do not have a lot of hope for this world in the face of climate change, and she names out Putin, Trump, and so forth. This is 2018 she's speaking. The rise of the right-wing forces, the miserable corruption, she goes on, the pileup of humanity and global slums, and the seeming endurance of capitalism beyond, so far beyond when it should have given way to something else. It's hard to have hope. I think, she says, we need grit. That's what you're saying. We need grit, responsibility, and determination instead of hope. We need to clean up the messes humans have made, socially, ecologically, politically. We have no choice but to try to redeem our species and make a better world than we have to date. It's not about hope, but something more like responsibility and maybe even curiosity. With our extraordinary brains, here we are, with our extraordinary brains and imaginations, our technologies and spirits, can't we do better? And then she goes on to give specific examples. Maybe you're helping two teenagers. Maybe you're, so not to give up on the thing. But I think there's still that sort of that theoretical space in which we are thinking, and I keep coming back to cultural studies of what is this capacity for making meaning? Also in communication studies, right? For making meaning. That's why performance is so theater, and where people can see. That's the imaginations part, right? People see the capacity to do otherwise. I'm thinking of Boal, Augusto Boal, in Theater of the Oppressed, and creating those conditions. This is part of the work that I'm trying to do in my work as well.
Thanks. That made me think about David Graeber's idea of imagination, that he thinks that imagination should precede the protest, the social movement. We cannot have the revolution and then start to imagine hope. Yeah, I think this is the idea.
I want just to say something about this, because coming to Bloch, he say also is someone that today is considered one that the beginner of concrete utopian experience. I mean, it's not just something, an illusion, something that doesn't exist. Because today many literatures or people are trying to see how utopia becomes something concrete in experiences. In this sense, performance is interesting because I think, for instance, in what happened in Turkey, in Gezi, is the moment, that this is like, you will talk about Genova in 2001, that is a very fundamental moment for a lot of people. This moment was very interesting because many people arrived there after years of work. This moment was a moment where another world was possible. It was this phase. This phase today is over. But it was the result of these temporalities that come from the 90s, the 80s, all these people working in NGO, altermondialism, etc. And this was a very important moment, like Gezi Park was a very important moment for Turkish society, not only. And I think in this moment are not the utopian. These are the moments where you are experiencing. I mean, for me, what is interesting is what today, from Gezi, what are the concepts of Gezi? Gezi creates something. Put seeds, grain. Genova 2001 was something. Occupy Wall Street creates something. Indignados creates something. Gilets jaunes creates something. I mean, this today is interesting to go to see how social movement, the different step for the movement, how they create something that generates other experience. In arts is more ephemeral, but at the same time they create something that create new opportunity. And today, for instance, if we see all these social movements today are much more in the individual, in the body, in the sexual, in this performative, but also I come back to what I was saying yesterday, not to support myself, but in this experience in the concrete. For instance, we have a lot of what call realistic utopian or concrete utopian, etc. And today are in these ecological communities, spiritual communities, and you have a lot of this kind of attempts to give. I mean, they are not coming from now just because they are the son, daughter, the consequences of the past social movement. I think we have to maybe to see how this evolved. Today is not the big utopia. Utopia is create these critics of the world today. But these critics create concrete experience in arts, with people's life. People go to live in a small place in countryside, say, I want to go out from this, and so create this community. I think in this sense, there is a link between block, art, etc. In this performance, also this creation of experiences in cities, in neighborhoods. Yes, we have the example of architecture. How it is architecture, they are not coming from nothing. They are coming from an idea of common. I think the idea of common with art. And at the same time with block. I mean, there is a link between this. I just want to say this, and this today for me is very interesting to go to see this as concrete experience, that what happened in concrete. Because this is for me today, the social movement is not the big social movement, and we lost this phase. We are in this phase where people are creating practical experience.
If I may, I think that's what I was trying to argue on the scale of a work of art that was created between just two people, scaling it, looking at different scales of what it is that you were just describing, from large social movements to an experience of a collective praxis. And I think I really appreciate that you brought back up the Wendy Brown citation and completed it, to which I may humbly add, maybe that's not just questions of brains, but bodies, and I think that's what we're trying to get to. And to maybe circle back to some of our shared concerns, which may not have translated into our communications in different languages, but I'd like to bring in the work of a performance studies theorist named André Lepecki. And I don't think that it's a total coincidence that Lepecki would have been the one to have been concerned with questions of choreo-policing, so the management of bodies during social movement protests, for instance, but just during daily life, that he would have been the same person to have also been concerned with reenactments, bodies as living archives. And so I think that when we're discussing questions of imagination, for me, what I'm concerned with is that our bodies are reimagining things that we might have inherited from one generation of movements to another, of social movements to another. And we're performing those, whether in a literal performance, which is maybe more of a concern of mine, to various performances in social spaces which enact or operate infrastructurally. And I think that here Lauren Berlant's work is actually quite important to understanding movements such as the ones that you're concerned with. So yeah, I think bringing in Lepecki here is kind of key in any case of my understanding of this work, as he's able to navigate what happens from a body or bodies to these bodies circulating in social movements and inversely.
We're going to ask the panel to just each do a quick response, because I think we're out of time.
Okay. If we have a few more minutes, we have until 12:15. Yeah, I'm ready, yeah. But before we finish up, we have a lot of food for lunch, so please all no. Yes, and but I know that there's two also quick comments here. Then we're not.
But just to abuse my position as chair, let the panel respond. They can each respond, and then once they're finished responding, we can see if there's time for questions from the audience.
And then if not, we can carry on over lunch. Yeah, we can carry on.
I share the same ideas as you, and the importance of Lepecki, for sure, as how he puts the body in the center.
But I think performance is a great notion to be able to think on multiple dimensions, not only corporally. It gives you the possibility to think about the space and the time. This is why I employ this term also in my research. And think responding or like commenting on the idea of putting the seeds and from the past to the present and to the future. I like in William Sewell, historical sociologist, I used his term of radical contingency before in my presentation. He talks about the path dependency. What he means that all the past occurrences, experiences, still existing today, and having it's like a seed. It is like something to stay, something that stays from the past to today, to present. And what, for example, just giving a concrete example, the standing man, he, after he realized this action, this performance, in the interview with me, but also in other interviews as he became super famous after this performance, he mentioned, for example, the sit-ins from the civil rights movement and tankmen from China, for example. And he said, I'm not the first one doing this. He said, I'm just one today doing this act, but I'm not the one, and I won't be the last one. So this was from his interview, I can tell. That so I think the artist or the activist, or activist artist, I don't know, even when you don't know the past occurrences, it stays in a way, you know, corporally. Yeah, exactly, about it. He was not that kind, very political person.
And this is why somatic practice is brought into social movements, into our understanding of how it is that we gather. So I'm a firm believer that we're constantly reinventing the wheel. We're not necessarily inventing new ways of engaging, and yet at the same time, we're re-engaging. And so it's these forms of re-engagement, of reenactment, that are of significance here and that we can continually reinterpret. But in this case, somatic practices is yet a new offering to be able to understand how to take care during the social practices such as the ones that we're talking about.
We do have time for the comments from the floor.
No. I would say, just on the last point, I think you're in the civil rights movement, that was referred to as radical rehearsal, right? And so this idea of what's embodied and the other thing I wanted to mention, just going back to cultural studies, was this notion of conjuncture, right? And Elisa Garza, who is one of the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement, has this really elegant way of thinking about conjuncture, like knowing what time it is, right? You've heard this, yeah. So I think just that's sort of sort of connecting well, let me just say this. I was also thinking about your presentation yesterday, too, as we're thinking about the standing man, and how we don't know what traces, what echoes are left that others, that, I see that connection, too, in terms of another way of thinking about the collective, that it's more ephemeral and that is still, but yet somehow still concrete, like it translates into a concrete movement sometimes, or even if it's temporary.
No, it was just to close and laugh. I was thinking about his intervention about the G8 in Genova, and we were there. And there was a younger student that was with me. He was 20, so I was like 29, 28. And we were there, and in front of this horrible chivalry of police that were coming into the famous Diaz place. My reaction was, of course, it's the police. His reaction was, that's generational. He was like, Fiamma, call the police. I found it incredible. I mean, it's like he could not believe that the police, it's not that he was a leftist, I mean, he was obviously an activist, but still he had, let's say, a faith in institutions, in certain institutions, that for me was obvious that you could not have faith on. No? So it's a different way of understanding power and how power is used. No? It's in this sense, it's conjunctural too, totally.
Thank you very much, everybody. I'll leave you with one thought. This is from my close friend of mine, G, who was a member of Sinn Féin. And without pedagogy to go along with the performative, all the performative is creating space so that others of us can build pipe bombs. Yeah. So. On this note, let's go eat some lunch.